He used the environment as a weapon, scalding water from damaged pipes, electrical shorts from torn cables, the mechanical room's tight quarters, turning into a maze of cover and concealment. His PTSD symptoms, which had been a disability in civilian life, became tactical advantages in combat. But there were too many of them, and they were using non-lethal weapons, while David fought to kill. The tranquilizer darts found their mark eventually, dropping him to his knees as his enhanced metabolism fought the sedatives. "I couldn't save my unit," he told Maya, pressing Marcus's hidden sketchbook into her hands as his vision blurred. Maya Chen's fingers trembled as she arranged the pens on her desk for the fourth time that morning. Each one had to be exactly parallel, precisely 2 inches apart. The red pen was 1.8 inches from the blue pen. Not right. Never right. At 28, she was the youngest senior analyst at Pemberton & Associates, but success felt like a house of cards that could collapse with a single imperfect decision. Her apartment was a description of control, books arranged by height and color, clothes organized by season and fabric type, emergency supplies rotated monthly according to a detailed spreadsheet. The panic attacks had started in college, when she realized that no amount of studying could guarantee perfect grades. They'd gotten worse in her career, triggered by typos in emails, missed deadlines by colleagues, anything that disrupted the precise order she needed to function. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Did you get the promotion yet? Mrs. Zhang's daughter just made partner at her law firm. She's only 28. Maya's chest tightened, the familiar weight of inadequacy covering her like a lead blanket. She opened her laptop and began typing her resignation letter. "Dear Mr. Pemberton, I regret to inform you that I am resigning my position effective immediately due to my fundamental inability to meet the standards required for." She deleted it, opened it again, deleted it again. The cursor blinked at her from the empty document. That's when she saw the advertisement pop up in her browser sidebar. Struggling with perfectionism? Dr. Elias Thorne's Sanctuary offers revolutionary treatment for high achievers. Discreet, effective, life-changing. She clicked before she could stop herself. 3 blocks away, David Rodriguez sat in his apartment, staring at the bottle of Jameson on his coffee table. He'd been home from Afghanistan for 2 years, but the war had followed him back like a loyal dog. Every car backfire was an IED. Every crowd was a potential ambush. Every night was a battlefield in his dreams. The apartment was a fortress. Deadbolts, security cameras, escape routes planned from every room. His neighbors thought he was paranoid. His ex-wife believed he was dangerous. Maybe they were both right. Lieutenant Colonel David Rodriguez, Bronze Star recipient, Purple Heart veteran, couldn't order coffee without scanning for threats. Couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. Couldn't watch his 4-year-old daughter play at the park without seeing insurgents in every shadow. The VA had given him pills that made him feel like he's sleepwalking while awake, and therapy sessions where he sat in uncomfortable silence across from therapists who'd never heard a bullet fired in anger. They asked him to process his trauma and develop coping strategies, as if war was something you could organize into neat psychological categories. His wife had left 6 months ago, taking Emma with her. "I can't watch you disappear anymore," Sarah had said, tears streaming down her face. "Emma asks why Daddy doesn't smile anymore, and I don't know what to tell her." David's laptop was open to a veteran support forum where he'd typed and deleted the same message a few times. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. Some days the only thing stopping me is knowing Emma needs me to try." Instead, he found himself clicking on an ad that promised understanding. Combat veterans deserve specialized care. Dr. Thorne's Sanctuary, where heroes heal in complete privacy. Sarah Williams had been invisible for so long, she sometimes wondered if she actually existed. At 31, she still lived with her elderly mother in the same bedroom she'd occupied since childhood, working a job she hated because leaving meant disappointing people. Her morning routine was a study in self-erasure. Neutral clothes that wouldn't draw attention, makeup applied to hide rather than enhance, hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her disappear into the background. At work, she ate lunch alone in the supply closet, afraid that sitting in the break room would force conversations she didn't know how to navigate. Her therapist called it severe social anxiety with avoidant tendencies, but Sarah knew the truth. She was simply too afraid to exist. Speaking up in meetings sent her into panic attacks. Making eye contact with strangers felt like exposure. The idea of dating or traveling or living independently seemed as impossible as flying to Mars. She'd never been in love, never traveled alone, never stood up for herself. When her mother berated her for being a disappointment to the family name, or her boss piled more work on her desk with dismissive comments about her having nothing better to do anyway, Sarah smiled and apologized. The only place she felt real was online, in chat rooms where her words carried weight and people responded to her thoughts instead of her appearance. Late one night, scrolling through a mental health forum, she found a private message from someone called Doc Thorne. "I've been watching your posts, Sarah. You have so much potential trapped inside that fear. You're not invisible to me. I can help you find your voice." Alex Rivera was everyone and no one. At 25, they had been a dozen different people. The rebel teenager covered in tattoos who shoplifted and started fights, the straight-A student who made their parents proud with academic achievements, the party animal who never went home alone and woke up in strangers' beds, the spiritual seeker who spent months at meditation retreats searching for inner peace, the ambitious entrepreneur who launched 3 failed startups. Each identity felt real in the moment and hollow the next day, like wearing costumes that never quite fit. Their apartment was a museum of abandoned selves. Meditation cushions next to drug paraphernalia, business suits hanging beside vintage band t-shirts, self-help books scattered among poetry collections. Borderline personality disorder, the last therapist had said before Alex stormed out. Unstable sense of self, fear of abandonment, emotional dysregulation, impulsive behavior patterns. Alex had thrown the diagnostic manual across the room. "You're not broken," they'd insisted, but reading the clinical description felt like watching their life dissected by a stranger who somehow knew them better than they knew themselves. The emptiness was the worst part. The feeling that underneath all the masks was nothing at all, just a void shaped like a person. Alex was cutting again, thin lines on their thighs that no one would see, each one a desperate attempt to feel something real. The pain was honest in a way nothing else was. That's when the email arrived. Finding yourself doesn't have to be a journey you take alone. Dr. Thorne's sanctuary specializes in identity integration therapy. We understand that you contain multitudes. Let us help you find harmony among them. Marcus Thompson looked in the mirror and saw a monster. At 19, he was 6'2" and athletic, objectively attractive by any standard according to the modeling scouts who'd approached him in high school, but all he could see were flaws. His nose was too big, obviously deformed. His jaw was wrong, too weak, making him look pathetic. His skin was disgusting, marked by scars from acne that others couldn't even see. He'd had 3 cosmetic surgeries already. Rhinoplasty at 17, jaw reconstruction at 18, chemical peels and laser treatments throughout his teens. Each procedure promised to fix what was broken. Each one revealed new imperfections that demanded correction. The surgeon who'd done his nose job had refused to do a revision, claiming it was perfectly proportioned and that further surgery would cause damage. Body dysmorphic disorder had cost him his full-ride athletic scholarship when he couldn't bear to have teammates see him in the locker room. It had cost him his girlfriend when he spent their dates obsessing over his appearance in every reflective surface. It had cost him most of his friends who grew tired of his constant need for reassurance about flaws they couldn't see. His parents thought he was vain, narcissistic, attention-seeking. "You're a handsome boy, Marcus. Stop fishing for compliments." They couldn't understand that he genuinely saw deformity where others saw beauty, that every mirror was a source of torture, that he spent hours each day examining himself and researching procedures and planning the next fix that would finally make him acceptable. The forum post seemed too good to be true. Young man seeks others who understand the pain of never being enough. Dr. Thorne's residential program has openings for people ready to see themselves clearly. Real change is possible. Dr. Elias Thorne was a predator who disguised as a healer so convincingly that even he sometimes believed his own performance. At 52, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that made people trust him instantly. Tall, silver-haired, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to look directly into your soul and understand your deepest pain. He spoke in measured tones about revolutionary treatments and breakthrough therapies, dropping references to prestigious universities and groundbreaking research. His office was filled with awards and certifications, though a careful observer might notice that none were dated more recently than 15 years ago. Thorne had lost his medical license after allegations of inappropriate relationships with patients, young, vulnerable women who'd sought his help for depression and trauma. But the allegations had been much worse than inappropriate relationships. 3 former patients had died by suicide within months of completing his treatment, and 2 others had suffered complete psychological breaks requiring permanent institutionalization. The medical board's investigation had revealed a pattern of emotional and psychological manipulation disguised as therapy. Thorne had systematically isolated patients from their support systems, convinced them that only he understood their pain, and then exploited their dependence for his own gratification. But he'd learned to be more careful. The sanctuary wasn't a licensed facility. It was a remote compound in the mountains of Colorado, purchased with money from silent partners in certain government agencies. Here, far from oversight and regulation, he could practice his true passion, the systematic study of human psychological breaking points. He selected his subjects carefully. People who were desperate, unlikely to be missed for weeks or months. People whose psychological vulnerabilities made them perfect test subjects for his experiments in mind control and behavioral modification. The government partners provided funding and legal protection in exchange for research data on psychological manipulation techniques. The 5 he'd chosen for his latest project were particularly promising specimens. Dr. Thorne spent months studying his targets through their digital footprints. Maya's social media was curated perfection. Every photo edited, every post precisely timed, every comment carefully considered. But between the lines, he read the desperation, the crushing fear of failure that drove her to work 16-hour days and check every email a lot of times before sending. David's online presence was minimal but revealing. Sparse posts in veteran forums, always offering help to others but never asking for it himself. The subtext was clear. A man drowning in guilt and hypervigilance, too proud to admit he needed help, but desperate enough to consider any lifeline. Sarah barely existed online, but her few forum posts revealed a mind sharp enough to see through others' facades while remaining blind to her own worth. She responded thoughtfully to others' problems, but never shared her own, even in anonymous spaces. Alex's digital identity was chaos. Multiple accounts under different names, posting history that shifted between philosophical insights and desperate pleas for connection. Their online behavior perfectly mirrored their offline identity fragmentation. Marcus's internet history was a roadmap of self-loathing. Plastic surgery forums, photo editing tutorials, hours spent on rating sites asking strangers to judge his appearance. He documented his own perceived deformities with obsessive detail, creating a catalog of imagined flaws. Each profile told Dr. Thorne exactly which psychological buttons to push. Maya arrived first, having chartered a private car service to maintain her schedule down to the minute. She'd researched Dr. Thorne extensively. His credentials were impressive, though his recent work was mysteriously absent from academic journals. His early papers on therapeutic breakthrough methods were brilliant, groundbreaking even. She told herself the isolation was intentional, designed to create a controlled healing environment away from the pressures of normal life. The sanctuary sat nestled in a valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks, a modern glass and steel structure that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside. It was beautiful in an unsettling way, like a predator disguised as prey. Maya made notes in her phone about architectural details and treatment amenities to research later. David's taxi struggled up the winding mountain road, and he found himself automatically scanning for exit routes and defensive positions. The driver was nervous, glancing repeatedly in his rearview mirror. "Strange place," he muttered as they climbed higher. "Folks go up there for treatment. Don't always come back down the same. Sometimes don't come back down at all." David's training kicked in. He memorized landmarks, estimated distances, noted the absence of cell phone coverage. When they finally reached the facility, he tipped the driver extra and asked him to remember the face of the passenger he'd brought up here. Sarah almost turned around 3 times during the journey, once actually asking the driver to take her back to the airport. Only the thought of disappointing Dr. Thorne, who had been so kind and understanding in his emails, kept her moving forward. She'd told her mother she was going on a mandatory work retreat, unable to admit she was seeking psychiatric help. The building's imposing beauty made her feel even smaller than usual. Other people belonged in places like this. Successful people, important people, people whose problems mattered. She was just Sarah Williams, invisible and forgettable. Alex arrived on a motorcycle, having impulsively decided to ride cross-country instead of flying. They were in their rebellious phase again, defiant attitude firmly in place, but the sanctuary's sterile beauty felt wrong somehow, like a hospital pretending to be a home. The reflection in the building's glass facade showed them a dozen different versions of themselves, which was either perfect symbolism or a sign they should turn around. Alex chose to find it amusing rather than disturbing. Marcus was the last to arrive, having spent the morning obsessing over his appearance in the hotel mirror. He'd changed clothes 4 times. The blue shirt made his nose look bigger, the black one emphasized his jaw asymmetry, the white one showed every imagined flaw in his skin tone. He'd considered canceling twice, convinced that Dr. Thorne would take one look at him and confirm his worst fears about his deformity. The building's reflective surfaces showed him distorted versions of himself from every angle, funhouse mirror reflections that confirmed every negative thought he'd ever had about his appearance. Dr. Thorne greeted each of them personally in his office, somehow knowing exactly what to say to make them feel understood. The room was a study in calculated comfort. Soft lighting that was flattering without being obvious, expensive furniture that suggested success and competence, diplomas and awards covering the walls like a reassuring parent's refrigerator. To Maya, he spoke about the burden of excellence and the isolation that came with being held to impossible standards. "Society needs people like you," he said, his voice warm with understanding. "But who takes care of the caretakers? Who tends to those who hold everything together?" With David, he discussed the unique challenges facing combat veterans, mentioning specific battles and military terminology that demonstrated real knowledge. "Civilians don't understand," he said. "They thank you for your service, but have no concept of what that service actually cost. Here, you're among people who understand that some wounds can't be seen." Sarah he approached with gentle patience, speaking softly and giving her time to respond. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he told her. "It's acting despite fear. You've been brave every day of your life just by continuing to exist in a world that feels overwhelming. That's heroism most people can't imagine." To Alex, he spoke about the richness of containing multiple selves and the society's narrow definitions of identity. Why should you have to choose just one way of being? The greatest artists, leaders, and innovators have always been complex, multifaceted individuals. Your fluidity is a gift, not a disorder. With Marcus, he was direct about the reality of appearance-based discrimination while validating the genuine pain of dysmorphic perception. "Society is cruel to those who don't fit narrow beauty standards," he said. "But more importantly, when your own mind becomes your enemy, when every mirror is a weapon turned against you, that's a special kind of hell that deserves specialized treatment." "Welcome to your new beginning," he told each of them with the same warm smile that never quite reached his eyes. They met each other that evening in an elegant dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. The food was excellent, professionally prepared meals that accommodated everyone's dietary restrictions without them having to ask. The conversation was stilted at first, each of them protective of their vulnerabilities. Maya introduced herself carefully, mentioning her work but downplaying her achievements. David gave only his name and branch of service. Sarah spoke so quietly they had to lean in to hear her. Alex seemed to shift personalities mid-sentence, starting confident and ending uncertain. Marcus barely looked up from his plate, angling his face away from the others, but gradually, they began to open up. "I haven't eaten dinner with other people in months," Sarah admitted quietly. "My mother and I eat in front of the TV, and at work, I eat in the supply closet." "Why the supply closet?" Alex asked, their voice gentle with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. "Because if I eat in the break room, people might talk to me and I never know what to say. I always say the wrong thing and then replay it in my head for days." Maya found herself nodding. "I understand that. I rehearse conversations before I have them, write scripts for phone calls, but it never helps because real interactions don't follow scripts." "Everything's improvisation," Alex agreed, "and some of us are better at it than others." David had been quietly observing the group dynamics, noting escape routes and assessing potential threats, old habits, but he found himself drawn into their conversation. In the army, everything was protocol, clear rules, clear expectations. Civilian life is messier. Messier, Marcus repeated, speaking for the first time. "That's a good word for it. Everything's subjective. How you look, what's acceptable, what's normal, no clear standards." Maya leaned forward, her analytical mind engaging. "But that's terrifying, isn't it? If there are no clear standards, how do you know if you're doing things right?" "Maybe you don't," Alex suggested. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the goal isn't to be right, it's just to be." The conversation continued for hours, touching on philosophy and pain with equal weight. They discovered unexpected commonalities. Maya and Marcus both struggled with control, though hers was behavioral and his was appearance-based. David and Sarah both felt like outsiders in civilian society, though for different reasons. Alex and everyone else shared the fundamental fear of being truly seen and found wanting. By the end of the evening, tentative connections had formed. For the first time in years, none of them felt completely alone. Dr. Thorne's revolutionary therapy began with morning group sessions in a circle of comfortable chairs arranged around a small fireplace. He called it Exposure Integration Protocol, a combination of intensive group therapy, controlled stress scenarios, and what he termed pharmaceutical enhancement. The first exercises seemed almost mundane. Dr. Thorne asked them to share increasingly personal details about their struggles, creating artificial intimacy through forced vulnerability. "Maya," he said during their first group session, "tell us about a time when your perfectionism cost you something important." Maya's hands twisted in her lap. I was working on a presentation for my biggest client. I stayed up for 3 days straight, revising and re-revising, making sure every slide was perfect. But I was so exhausted that I fell asleep during the presentation itself. They fired our firm the next day. "And how did that make you feel?" Dr. Thorne prompted. "Like I'd proven what I'd always suspected, that I'm fundamentally flawed, that no amount of effort can make me good enough." Around the circle, the others nodded with recognition. David spoke about missing his daughter's recital because he couldn't force himself to sit in an auditorium full of potential threats. Sarah described turning down a promotion because it would require public speaking. Alex talked about sabotaging relationships the moment they got serious because they were terrified of being truly known. Marcus shared how he'd stopped attending classes after a particularly bad dysmorphic episode convinced him everyone was staring at his deformed face. Dr. Thorne listened with practiced empathy, taking notes that the patients assumed were therapeutic observations. In reality, he was mapping their psychological pressure points with clinical precision. The trust exercises started simple, partner work where they had to maintain eye contact for 5 minutes. Sarah and Marcus were paired first, both of them squirming with discomfort. "I can't," Sarah whispered after 30 seconds. "Everyone can see how pathetic I am." "No," Marcus said quietly, surprising himself. "I just see someone who's scared, like me." They made it the full 5 minutes, and something shifted between them. Sarah had been seen and hadn't been rejected. Marcus had looked at someone else instead of obsessing over his own reflection. Maya and David were paired next. Maya struggled to maintain eye contact without trying to read his thoughts or predict his reactions. David fought the urge to scan for threats behind her. "You don't have to figure me out," he told her gently. "I'm not a problem that needs solving." But what if I say the wrong thing? What if I mess this up? Then you mess it up. World doesn't end. Alex sat with Dr. Thorne himself, cycling through different personas as they tried to decide who to be in this moment. Who are you right now? He asked. I don't know, Alex admitted. That's the problem. Perhaps the problem is thinking you need to choose just one. The second week brought medication, mild anxiolytics to help with the intensive therapy, Dr. Thorne explained, handing out small white pills. These will help you access memories and emotions that might otherwise be too overwhelming to process. The pills were something else entirely. Compounds designed by military contractors to increase suggestibility, lower inhibitions, and heighten emotional responses. But the patients didn't know that. They only knew that the pills made therapy feel more intense, more real, more transformative. Under the influence of the drugs, their group sessions became raw and powerful. Maya sobbed as she described the crushing weight of her mother's expectations and her own impossible standards. David finally spoke about the convoy attack that had killed 3 of his soldiers, his voice breaking as he detailed the guilt that consumed him. I was supposed to protect them, he said, tears streaming down his face. 23 years old, kids who trusted me to bring them home safe. I failed them. Sarah found herself speaking up more, her voice growing stronger as the medication lowered her social inhibitions. You didn't fail them. War failed them. The people who sent you there failed them. You were just a soldier doing your job. But I was their leader. I made the decisions that a 23-year-old kid had to make in an impossible situation, Alex interrupted, their voice fierce with protective anger. Stop taking responsibility for things that were never your fault. The medication was also making them more emotionally reactive, more dependent on each other for support. Maya found herself clinging to David during his panic attacks, her need to fix things focusing entirely on helping him heal. Sarah began standing up for the others when Dr. Thorne's questions became too aggressive, finding courage in defending her friends that she'd never found in defending herself. Alex cycled through personalities more rapidly, but found that certain aspects of each identity were drawn to specific members of the group. Their protective side emerged around Sarah, their analytical side engaged with Maya's perfectionism, their artistic side connected with Marcus's aesthetic sensitivity, their warrior side responded to David's military bearing. Marcus started drawing again for the first time since his last surgery, creating portraits of the group that captured their inner beauty rather than their perceived flaws. His drawing of Sarah showed her as radiant and confident, the person she was becoming in their supportive environment. His sketch of David emphasized strength and nobility rather than the damage war had left behind. Is this how you see me? Sarah asked, staring at her portrait in wonder. It's how you really are, Marcus said simply. The rest is just noise. The third week brought more intensive exercises. Dr. Thorne called them breakthrough protocols, designed to force rapid psychological change through controlled trauma. Maya's perfectionism exercise involved being locked in a room with a series of increasingly impossible tasks. Mathematical problems with no solutions, puzzles missing crucial pieces, deadlines that moved every time she approached them. The room was equipped with cameras and speakers that broadcast her failures to the group. Notice how Maya's need for control becomes self-destructive when faced with uncontrollable variables. Dr. Thorne narrated as they watched her break down on screen. Her perfectionism isn't strength, it's a defense mechanism that actually prevents growth. Maya spent 8 hours in that room, moving from confident problem-solving to frustrated anger to sobbing despair. When she was finally released, she collapsed into David's arms, shaking and exhausted. It's not real, he whispered into her hair. Whatever he's trying to prove, it's not real. You're not broken. But the exercise had shaken something fundamental in Maya's worldview. If she couldn't trust her own competence, what could she trust? David's exercise was more brutal. Strapped to a chair in a recreation of a military transport vehicle, he was subjected to the sounds and sensations of the convoy attack that had given him PTSD. But Dr. Thorne had enhanced the scenario with details from David's therapy sessions. The names of the soldiers who died, the exact sequence of events, the specific sounds David had described in his most vulnerable moments. The others watched on monitors as David relived the worst day of his life in excruciating detail. His training took over initially: tactical assessment, threat evaluation, damage control. But as the scenario continued for hours, his psychological defenses crumbled. "Rodriguez, why didn't you check the road?" the recorded voice of his dead commanding officer asked through the speakers. "These men died because you failed them." David screamed himself hoarse before the exercise ended. When he was released, he could barely stand. Alex and Sarah supported him back to his room, where he curled into a fetal position and shook for hours. "I should have died with them," he whispered. "I should have been the one." Maya held him while the others formed a protective circle around his bed. "No," she said fiercely. "You survived for a reason. You survived to be here with us. You survived to save other people." Sarah's exercise was designed to exploit her fear of being seen and judged. She was placed in a room full of people, actually staff members in civilian clothes, and told to get their attention any way she could. But no matter what she did, they ignored her completely. She started politely, asking for help or directions. When that didn't work, she tried being louder, more assertive. Then she attempted humor, storytelling, even performing. For 12 hours, she escalated from whispers to screams, from polite requests to desperate pleas, but they acted as if she didn't exist. The others watched in horror as Sarah performed increasingly desperate acts trying to be noticed, dancing, singing, even stripping off her shirt. But the actors continued their scripted conversations as if she were invisible. "This is your truth, Sarah," Dr. Thorne's voice announced as she finally collapsed sobbing on the floor. "You are nothing to anyone. You have always been nothing. Your fear isn't irrational. It's accurate self-assessment." When she was released, Sarah was catatonic for hours. Alex sat with her, cycling through different personalities trying to find one that could reach her. Finally, they settled into their most genuine self. Scared, fragmented, but caring. "He's wrong," Alex whispered, holding Sarah's hands. "You're not invisible to us. You're the reason I've stayed stable this long. You listen without trying to fix. You see without judging. You're real to me." Maya brought Sarah her favorite tea. She'd noticed Sarah's preferences and remembered them, and sat on her other side. "You documented everything he's done to us. You're the only one brave enough to write it all down. That's not nothing, that's everything." Alex's exercise was pharmaceutical rather than physical. Dr. Thorne administered a dissociative drug that induced severe depersonalization, then placed them in a room of mirrors while his voice asked probing questions designed to destabilize their sense of self. "Which one is real, Alex? Can you tell anymore? Look at all those faces. Are any of them actually you? Maybe you're just an empty shell that other people's expectations fill up. Maybe you never existed at all." The drug made everything feel dreamlike and distant. Alex watched themselves in the mirrors, but couldn't connect the reflected images to any sense of internal identity. They tried to hold on to the personalities that felt most real, but under the chemical influence, even those seemed like elaborate performances. They spent hours reaching toward mirrors, trying to touch their own reflection, trying to prove they existed. The others watched the feed with growing horror as Alex seemed to lose all sense of reality. "He's destroying them," Maya said, her voice tight with fury. "We have to stop this," David said, moving toward the door. But it was locked, and when he pounded on it, Dr. Thorne's voice came through speakers. Interrupting now would be counterproductive. Alex needs to confront their fundamental emptiness before real integration can begin. When Alex was finally released, they didn't recognize the others for several hours. They spoke to themselves in different voices, argued with reflections, seemed to be having conversations with people who weren't there. Marcus sat with them through the night, drawing their face over and over, each sketch showing a different expression, but the same underlying person. "Look," he said when Alex finally seemed present. "Same eyes in every drawing, same person. You're real. You're here. You're my friend." Marcus's exercise was the cruelest, because it used his own disorder against him with such precision. Dr. Thorne showed him corrected versions of his face using sophisticated digital manipulation. The nose he'd always wanted, the jaw he believed would make him handsome, the skin he thought would make him acceptable. "This is who you could be," Dr. Thorne said, comparing the digitally perfected images to Marcus's actual reflection. Do you see the difference? Do you see how wrong you are? Then came the surgical tools, scalpels, mirrors, local anesthetic. Fix yourself, Dr. Thorne commanded. You know what's wrong. You've always known. I'm giving you the opportunity to finally be right about your own face. The others watched in horror as Marcus approached the mirror with a scalpel, studying his reflection with the focused intensity of a surgeon. The body dysmorphic disorder made him see deformities that didn't exist, but the combination of medication and psychological pressure made those hallucinations feel absolutely real. You don't have to do this, Maya said through the intercom Dr. Thorne had allowed them to access. Marcus, look at me. Look at my voice, not the mirror. You're beautiful exactly as you are, Sarah added, her voice stronger than they'd ever heard it. I see you clearly, and you're beautiful. Alex joined in, their voice cycling through different tones but consistent in message. The mirror lies, Dr. Thorne lies, we're telling you the truth. David's voice was quiet but firm. Son, I've seen real ugly in this world. War, hatred, cruelty, that's ugly. You're just young and hurting. Marcus hesitated, the scalpel wavering in his hand. For a moment he could almost see himself through their eyes instead of his own distorted perception. But Dr. Thorne's voice cut through their support. Listen to them lie to make you feel better. Look at yourself, Marcus. Really look. See what they're too polite to say. Marcus looked in the mirror and saw only deformity. The scalpel moved toward his face. That night, as they all dealt with the psychological aftermath of Marcus's exercise, Dr. Thorne had stopped him just before he could cause permanent damage, claiming it was a therapeutic breakthrough. Maya found herself outside David's room. I can't sleep, she said simply. Neither can I. He opened the door wider. Want to not sleep together? His room was sparse, military neat, with escape routes mapped and improvised weapons placed strategically. Maya's analytical mind appreciated the efficiency, but her heart responded to the vulnerability underneath the tactical preparation. They sat on his bed, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. I keep thinking about what he said, Maya admitted, about my perfectionism being a defense mechanism. What if he's right? What if everything I think is strength is actually weakness? Then you're weak in the same way I'm weak, David replied. The same way we're all weak, trying to survive with whatever tools we have. Your tools work better than mine. You actually saved people. I just organize things. David turned to face her, his expression serious. Maya, you've been taking care of all of us since we got here. Making sure we eat, checking on us when we're struggling, standing up to Thorne when he pushes too hard. That's not organizing things. That's leading. I don't feel like a leader. I feel like a fraud who's good at pretending she knows what she's doing. Welcome to leadership, David said with a sad smile. Most of us are just pretending and hoping it works out. They talked until dawn, sharing stories about their families, their fears, their dreams for who they might become if they could heal. Maya told him about wanting to help other perfectionists find peace without sacrificing excellence. David spoke about maybe becoming a counselor for other veterans, using his experience to help people who were fighting the same battles. You could do that, Maya said. You could help so many people, only if I figure out how to help myself first. Maybe we figure it out together. When they finally fell asleep, curled together on top of the covers, it was the first peaceful rest either of them had experienced in months. Sarah and Alex seemed like opposites. One desperately trying to disappear, the other constantly shifting between larger-than-life personas. But their friendship developed through quiet moments when Alex's personas dropped away and Sarah's defenses came down. It started when Sarah found Alex having a panic attack in the library, cycling rapidly between personalities and unable to settle on any sense of self. Sarah approached cautiously, her own anxiety making her hypersensitive to distress in others. Hey, she said softly, sitting at a careful distance. You don't have to be anyone right now. You can just be. Alex looked up with tear-filled eyes. I don't know who that is anymore. Every time I think I've found myself, it turns out to be another character I'm playing. Maybe that's okay, Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness. Maybe you don't have to be just one thing. Maybe you can be all of them. But which one is real? Sarah considered this, drawing on years of observation from the sidelines. What if they're all real? What if you're not broken, just bigger than most people? Like you contain more possibilities than one identity can hold. It was the longest speech Sarah had made since arriving, and Alex stared at her in wonder. How did you get so wise while being so scared of everything? Fear makes you watch people carefully. You learn things. They spent hours in the library after that, Alex reading aloud while Sarah listened. Alex loved performing, bringing characters to life with different voices and expressions, while Sarah enjoyed being entertained without having to perform herself. It was a perfect symbiosis. Alex felt seen and appreciated, Sarah felt included without pressure. "I think I love you," Alex said one evening after finishing a particularly dramatic reading of Shakespeare. Sarah panicked. "Oh, I don't. I mean, I like you too, but..." "Not like that," Alex laughed, their voice gentle. "I mean, I love who you are, how you see things, how you make me feel less crazy." "You make me feel less invisible," Sarah replied. "Like I matter." "You do matter. You matter so much." Marcus's integration into their found family happened through his art. After his near mutilation during Dr. Thorne's exercise, he'd stopped looking in mirrors entirely. Instead, he drew the others obsessively, capturing not just their physical features but their emotional landscapes. His drawing of Maya showed her surrounded by perfectly organized chaos, papers and charts and plans, but her face peaceful, as if she'd finally found a way to control that didn't require perfection. David appeared as a guardian figure, strong but gentle, protecting something precious rather than preparing for battle. Sarah was depicted mid-speech, confident and radiant, finally taking up the space she deserved. Alex appeared as multiple overlapping figures, all beautiful, all valid, all part of the same person. "This is how you see us?" Maya asked, studying his sketchbook. "This is how you really are," Marcus said, "when you're not looking at yourselves through your own distorted lenses." The others began commissioning drawings from him, not of themselves, but of people they loved. Maya asked for a portrait of her younger sister, describing her with such warmth that Marcus was able to capture not just her features, but her spirit. David requested a drawing of his daughter Emma, working from wallet photos and stories about her laugh and her obsession with dinosaurs. "She's beautiful," Marcus said, showing David the finished portrait. "She has your eyes, but happier." "She's everything good about me without any of the damage," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe that's not true," Sarah suggested quietly. "Maybe she got your strength too. Maybe she got your protective instincts and your loyalty and your courage. And maybe someday she'll understand that her daddy was a hero who came home carrying invisible wounds," Alex added. "And maybe she'll be proud of how hard you fought to heal them." Marcus began teaching the others to draw, using art as a way to see themselves and each other more clearly. Maya discovered she had a talent for precise, detailed sketches that reflected her analytical nature. David's drawings were bold and emotional, full of movement and intensity. Sarah's art was delicate and observant, capturing small details others missed. Alex created abstract pieces that seemed to shift and change depending on which personality was holding the pencil. "Art doesn't lie," Marcus told them. "It can't. It comes from someplace deeper than your conscious mind, someplace that knows the truth even when your thoughts are confused." By week 3, the medications were stronger and their effects more pronounced. Dr. Thorne claimed they were increasing the dosage to break through remaining psychological resistance, but the pills were actually military-grade compounds designed for interrogation and mind control. The enhanced emotional reactivity brought their relationships into sharp focus. Maya's perfectionism began extending to her care for the others. She needed to protect them perfectly, help them perfectly, love them perfectly. When she couldn't, the anxiety was overwhelming. David's hypervigilance expanded to include emotional threats as well as physical ones. He could sense shifts in the others' moods, predict when someone was about to have a breakdown, and position himself to provide support. But he also became obsessively protective, seeing Dr. Thorne's psychological manipulations as enemy action requiring military response. Sarah's newfound voice became stronger, but also more emotionally volatile. She began confronting Dr. Thorne directly during sessions, calling out his manipulative techniques and demanding answers about their treatment. "This isn't therapy," she said during one group session, her voice shaking but determined. "Therapy doesn't involve torture. Therapy doesn't involve making people relive their worst traumas for hours. What are you really doing to us?" Alex's personality shifts became more extreme, but also more purposeful. They seemed to be developing an internal communication system between their different identities, switching strategically based on what each situation required. The protective personality emerged when others were threatened, the analytical one during Dr. Thorne's psychological games, the charming one when dealing with staff. Marcus stopped looking in mirrors entirely, but began seeing himself more clearly through his art and his friends' eyes. The body dysmorphic distortions were still there, but they were competing with new input, genuine care and appreciation from people who saw him as beautiful. Their trauma bonding intensified under the influence of the medication and shared suffering. They developed rituals and inside jokes, ways of communicating without words, protective behaviors that felt as natural as breathing. Maya began braiding Sarah's hair each morning, a meditative ritual that helped both of them start the day centered. Sarah started saving choice pieces of food from meals for Alex, who often forgot to eat when they were cycling between personalities. Alex began telling elaborate bedtime stories that helped David sleep without nightmares. Fairy tales where the heroes were wounded warriors who found peace. David taught Marcus basic self-defense, channeling his protective instincts into building confidence in someone who felt vulnerable. Marcus drew them constantly, but now his sketches showed them interacting. Maya and David holding hands while looking at maps, planning their future together. Sarah and Alex reading in the library. Sarah finally relaxed, Alex finally settled. All five of them sitting around a table, laughing about something only they understood. "We're going to get out of here together," Maya said one night as they gathered in secret in the library. "And when we do, we're going to stay in touch. We're going to be there for each other." "Found family," Alex said, the term emerging from one of their more literary personalities. People who choose to love each other despite everything. "I've never had family like this," Sarah admitted. "People who actually see me. I've never had friends who knew about the war stuff and didn't try to fix me or run away," David said. "I've never had people tell me I was beautiful and have it feel true," Marcus added. Maya felt something settle in her chest, a peace she'd never experienced. "I've never had people who let me be imperfect and still loved me." They made a pact that night, holding hands in a circle like children playing games. They would survive this together, protect each other at all costs, and expose Dr. Thorne when they got out. No matter what he did to them, they would not let him destroy what they built together. But Dr. Thorne was listening through hidden microphones, taking notes on their bond strength and planning how to weaponize their love against them. Dr. Thorne announced the beginning of the integration phase with barely contained excitement. "You've made remarkable progress in identifying your core psychological patterns," he told them during their morning group session. "Now we'll work on permanently restructuring those patterns through intensive breakthrough experiences." What he didn't tell them was that he'd spent the previous weeks documenting their deepest fears, traumas, and pressure points to create personalized psychological torture scenarios. The integration phase was designed to break them completely, studying exactly how much trauma the human psyche could absorb before complete collapse. Maya's exercise began at 6 a.m. in a white room filled with workstations. Each station had a different impossible task: financial models with deliberately corrupted data, legal documents with missing pages, emergency scenarios requiring impossible decisions with incomplete information. "You have 8 hours to complete all tasks perfectly," Dr. Thorne's voice announced through speakers. "Any errors will result in consequences for your friends." Maya threw herself into the work with desperate intensity, her perfectionism turning into a weapon against herself. The first task seemed manageable, a budget analysis for a fictional company, but as she worked, she discovered that the data was contradictory, the requirements were impossible, and every decision she made triggered new problems. When she made her first error, choosing option A over option B, in a scenario where both were deliberately wrong, speakers in David's room began playing the sounds of warfare at devastating volume. She could hear him screaming through the building's ventilation system. "Stop," she shouted at the cameras. "I'll fix it. I'll do it right." But there was no right answer. Every choice led to punishment for someone she loved. As the hours passed, Maya moved from confident problem-solving to frustrated anger to desperate pleading to complete psychological collapse. The others watched her deterioration on monitors in their locked rooms, forced to witness her torture while being unable to help. Maya, who had been their anchor and their protector, was being systematically destroyed in front of them. "Please," she sobbed at hour 6, her hands bleeding from clawing at the unsolvable puzzles. "Please. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt them anymore." But the exercises continued. For every mistake, one of her friends suffered. David was subjected to sounds of battle. Sarah was placed in total isolation. Alex was given drugs that induced dissociation. Marcus was forced to stare at distorted images of himself. Notice how Maya's need for control becomes self-destructive when faced with uncontrollable variables, Dr. Thorne narrated to his hidden cameras, documenting everything for his research. Her perfectionism isn't strength. It's a pathological defense mechanism that can be exploited to guarantee compliance. When Maya was finally released after 8 hours, she was catatonic with exhaustion and psychological trauma. She'd failed every task, and her friends had suffered because of her failures. Everything she'd believed about herself, her competence, her ability to protect others, her worth as a person, lay in ruins. David held her as she shook, his own trauma temporarily forgotten in the face of her devastation. "It wasn't real," he whispered. "The tasks were impossible. He designed them to be impossible. But you all suffered because I failed." "We suffered because he's a sadist," Alex said fiercely, their protective personality fully engaged. "This isn't on you. This is on him." But Maya couldn't hear them. The perfectionist's greatest nightmare, being responsible for others' pain through her own inadequacy, had been made manifest. Something fundamental had broken inside her. David's exercise was designed to weaponize his PTSD and survivor's guilt with surgical precision. Dr. Thorne had studied his military records, his therapy sessions, even his classified after-action reports to recreate the convoy attack that had shattered his mind. He was strapped into a chair inside a recreation of a Humvee, complete with authentic sounds, smells, and vibrations. The scenario began as a routine patrol, exactly as David remembered it, but as it progressed, Dr. Thorne added details that turned memory into nightmare. The voices of his dead soldiers came through the speakers, but instead of their real final words, they spoke accusations. "Why didn't you check the road better, Lieutenant? Why didn't you see the IED? We trusted you to bring us home. Rodriguez, you failed us," came the voice of Sergeant Martinez, who'd been 22 when he died. "We had families, kids, dreams. You took all of that away because you weren't good enough." But the cruelest addition was new footage, edited video that replaced his dead soldiers' faces with those of his new friends. Maya, Sarah, Alex, and Marcus were suddenly the ones dying in the explosion, their voices crying out for help he couldn't provide. "See how your weakness led to their deaths?" Dr. Thorne's voice provided commentary as the scenario looped again and again. "You couldn't save your unit, and you can't save them either. Everyone you care about dies because you're not strong enough, not fast enough, not good enough." The others watched David's psychological destruction on monitors, helpless to intervene. Maya beat her fists bloody against her locked door. Sarah screamed herself hoarse, calling his name. Alex cycled through personalities trying to find one strong enough to break down walls. Marcus drew frantically, sketch after sketch of David as a hero, as if art could somehow counteract the poison being pumped into his mind. David endured 6 hours of psychological torture, reliving the worst day of his life while watching his new family die over and over again. His military training helped initially. Tactical assessment, compartmentalization, focus on the mission. But as the scenario continued and the guilt compounded, his defenses crumbled. When he was finally released, David couldn't speak for hours. He sat in the corner of his room, staring at nothing, occasionally muttering apologies to people who weren't there. The others took turns sitting with him, offering presents without pressure. "I should have died with them," he finally whispered to Maya as she held his shaking hands. "I should have been the one, and now I'm gonna get you all killed too." "No," Maya said fiercely, her own recent trauma making her voice shake but her conviction clear. "You're going to save us. That's who you are, someone who saves people." "I failed. You survived. There's a difference. And because you survived, you're here to protect us, to teach us how to be strong." Sarah's exercise was designed to prove her deepest fear, that she was fundamentally invisible and worthless. She was placed in a room designed to look like a cocktail party, filled with staff members trained to ignore her completely, no matter what she did. "Your task is simple," Dr. Thorne's voice announced. "Get one person to acknowledge your existence. You have 12 hours. Sarah started politely, approaching individuals and groups with the social scripts she'd memorized from self-help books. "Excuse me, could you help me find the bathroom?" When that failed, she tried compliments. "I love your dress. Where did you get it?" The actors continued their scripted conversations as if she weren't there. The others watched in growing horror as Sarah escalated from whispers to normal speaking voice to shouting. She tried humor, storytelling, even singing songs she remembered from childhood. The actors stepped around her as if she were furniture. "This is your truth, Sarah," Dr. Thorne's voice announced periodically. "You are nothing to anyone. Your fear isn't irrational, it's accurate self-assessment." Hour 3 brought desperate creativity. Sarah began performing, reciting poetry she'd memorized, even dancing to music only she could hear. Still nothing. Hour 6 brought degradation. She offered to serve drinks, clean up spills, anything to be useful enough to warrant acknowledgement. The actors accepted her services without thanks or recognition, using her labor while treating her as invisible. Hour 9 brought complete desperation. Sarah stripped off her shirt, thinking that surely someone would react to nudity. But the actors continued their conversations, stepping around her semi-naked form without even glancing down. By hour 12, Sarah was sobbing on the floor, hoarse from screaming, exhausted from performing, broken by the ultimate confirmation of her worst fears about herself. When she was released, Sarah was blank for 6 hours. The others formed a protective circle around her bed, taking turns holding her hands and whispering reassurances she couldn't hear. Alex sat with her through the night, cycling through personalities trying to find the right voice to reach her. "Sarah?" They whispered in their most genuine tone. "You're real. You're here. You matter." Maya brought Sarah's journal, her secret documentation of Dr. Thorne's abuse, and read entries aloud. "Listen to your own words," she said. "Look how clearly you see things, how carefully you observe, how brave you are for writing this down." David positioned himself by the door, standing guard. "No one gets to hurt you again," he said quietly. "I won't let them." Marcus drew her over and over. Sarah laughing, Sarah thinking, Sarah being beautiful in a dozen different ways. When she finally woke up, he showed her the sketches. "I don't look like that," she whispered. "Yes, you do. This is what we see when we look at you." Slowly, Sarah began to believe them. Their love was real, which meant she was real. Their care was genuine, which meant she was worth caring about. Alex's exercise was the most sophisticated because Dr. Thorne understood that their fragmentary identity was both their greatest vulnerability and their strongest defense mechanism. He administered a cocktail of dissociative drugs and sensory deprivation, then placed them in a room of mirrors while asking questions designed to destabilize any sense of continuous self. "Which personality is having this conversation, Alex? Are you the rebel or the student? The artist or the seeker? Look at all those reflections. Which one is actually you?" The drug made everything feel dreamlike and distant. Alex watched themselves in the mirrors but couldn't connect the reflected images to any sense of internal identity. Each reflection seemed to show a different person entirely. Sometimes the tattooed rebel, sometimes the clean-cut academic, sometimes faces they didn't recognize at all. "Maybe you're just an empty shell that other people's expectations fill up," Dr. Thorne continued, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Maybe you never existed at all. Maybe you're just a collection of responses to trauma, not a real person." Hours passed. Alex reached toward mirrors, trying to touch their own reflection, trying to prove they existed. They spoke to themselves in different voices, but under the chemical influence, even their internal dialogue felt foreign and scripted. "Who am I?" they asked their reflection. "Nobody," Dr. Thorne's voice replied. "You are nobody. You have always been nobody. Your friends think they love you, but they're loving an illusion. When they realize you're empty, they'll leave like everyone else." The others watched Alex's dissolution with helpless horror. Maya analyzed the camera angles and drug delivery systems, trying to understand the technical aspects of their friend's torture. David assessed the lock mechanisms and guard rotations, planning rescue scenarios. Sarah documented everything in her hidden journal, her own trauma transformed into fierce protectiveness. Marcus drew Alex obsessively, all their personalities, all their expressions, trying to capture their wholeness while watching them fragment. When Alex was finally released after 10 hours, they didn't recognize the others initially. They spoke to themselves in different voices, argued with reflections that weren't there, seemed to be having conversations with invisible people. "Do you know who I am?" Maya asked gently. Alex stared at her with unfocused eyes. You're the perfect one. But which me are you talking to?" "I'm talking to my friend Alex. All of them. The whole person." "There is no whole person. There's just pieces." Marcus sat with them through the night, drawing their face over and over, each sketch showing a different expression but the same underlying features. "Look," he said when Alex finally seemed present. "Same eyes in every drawing. Same nose, same mouth, same person. The expressions change, but the face is consistent. You're real. You're here. You're my friend." "But which friend am I?" "All of them," Sarah said quietly. "You're all of them, and that's what makes you amazing." Marcus's exercise was the cruelest because it used his own disorder against him with such precision that even his friend's support couldn't counteract it completely. Dr. Thorne had studied body dysmorphic disorder extensively, understanding exactly how the condition distorted perception and reasoning. The exercise began with corrected versions of Marcus's face using sophisticated digital manipulation, subtle changes that addressed every flaw he'd ever identified. The nose he'd always wanted, the jaw he believed would make him handsome, the skin he thought would make him acceptable. The alterations were shown in progression, from his actual face to increasingly perfected versions. "This is who you could be," Dr. Thorne said, comparing the digitally perfected images to Marcus's actual reflection in a wall of mirrors. "Do you see the difference? Do you see how wrong your face is right now?" The body dysmorphic disorder made the comparison devastating. Where others saw minimal differences between the images, Marcus saw proof of his deepest fears. The corrected versions looked like completely different people, beautiful, acceptable, worthy of love. His real face looked deformed by comparison. Then came the surgical tools: scalpels, clamps, sutures, local anesthetic. Professional equipment arranged on a sterile table like an offering. "Fix yourself," Dr. Thorne commanded. "You know what's wrong. You've always known. I'm giving you the opportunity to finally be right about your own face." The others watched through intercom feeds, screaming their protests and support. Maya analyzed the setup, trying to find technical flaws in the scenario. David planned tactical interventions he couldn't execute from his locked room. Sarah wrote frantically in her journal, documenting every detail of the abuse. Alex offering different perspectives on beauty and worth. "You don't have to do this," Maya called through the intercom Dr. Thorne had allowed them to access. "Marcus, listen to my voice, not the mirror. You're perfect exactly as you are." "You're beautiful," Sarah added, her voice stronger than they'd ever heard it. "Not because of your face, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your talent, your gentle heart." Alex joined in, their voice cycling through different tones but consistent in message. "The mirror lies. Dr. Thorne lies. Your friends are telling you the truth." David's voice was quiet but firm. "Son, I've seen real ugly in this world. War, hatred, cruelty. That's ugly. You're just young and hurting, and there's nothing ugly about pain." Marcus hesitated, the scalpel wavering in his hand. For a moment, he could almost see himself through their eyes instead of his own distorted perception. But then Dr. Thorne activated another screen, showing Marcus's reflection next to the corrected versions, and the dysmorphic distortion slammed back into place. Listen to them lie to make you feel better, Dr. Thorne's voice cut through their support. Look at yourself, Marcus. Really look. See what they're too polite to say. See why no one has ever loved you for who you really are. Marcus looked in the mirror and saw only deformity, only wrongness, only proof that he was as broken as he'd always believed. The scalpel moved toward his face. But then Sarah's voice came through the speakers, stronger than any of them had ever heard it. Marcus Thompson, you listen to me right now. I have spent my entire life being invisible, being nothing, being ignored. But you see me. You draw me like I'm beautiful. You make me feel real. If I matter to you, then you matter too. Put down the knife and look at your friends instead of the mirror. The scalpel stopped an inch from his cheek. Marcus looked at the camera instead of his reflection, tears streaming down his face. I can't see myself clearly, he whispered. I don't know what's real anymore. We're real, Alex said. Our love for you is real. Trust that instead of the mirror. Dr. Thorne watched Marcus lower the scalpel with barely concealed fury. The subject had been so close to self-mutilation, providing perfect data on body dysmorphic manipulation under extreme stress. But the group's bond had interfered with the outcome. He would have to separate them. That night, Dr. Thorne visited Marcus alone in his room. The young man was staring at his hands instead of looking in mirrors, still shaken by how close he'd come to cutting his own face. You disappointed me today, Marcus, Dr. Thorne said, his warm therapist mask completely gone. You were so close to a breakthrough, so close to finally taking control of your deformity. They said I was beautiful, Marcus whispered. They lied. Look at yourself. Dr. Thorne produced a small hand mirror, forcing Marcus to confront his reflection. Look at that nose. Look at that asymmetrical jaw. Look at that scarred skin. Do you think they would choose to look like you? The questions hit like physical blows. Marcus tried to remember his friends' voices, their drawings, their love, but Dr. Thorne's words were toxic precisely because they echoed his own thoughts. You know what you need to do, Dr. Thorne said, placing a scalpel on Marcus's nightstand. You know how to fix this. Either fix your face or fix the problem permanently. He left Marcus alone with the blade and the mirror. Alex found him in the bathroom at 3 a.m., blood pooling on the white tile floor. He'd chosen the second option, not correcting his perceived facial flaws, but ending the torment entirely. The cuts were precise, professional, exactly the kind of wounds someone with his knowledge of anatomy would make for maximum efficiency. I just wanted to be beautiful, he whispered as Alex held pressure on the wounds with towels and screamed for help that didn't come. I just wanted to stop seeing myself as broken. You are beautiful, Alex sobbed, cycling rapidly through personalities as trauma triggered their fragmentation. You are so fucking beautiful, Marcus. Inside and out, you're the most beautiful person I've ever known. But Marcus was fading, his eyes losing focus. Draw me, he whispered. Draw me one more time. Draw me beautiful. I don't need to draw you beautiful, Alex cried. You already are. Marcus smiled, a peaceful expression that Alex had never seen on his face before. Thank you for seeing me. He died holding Alex's hand, blood spreading across the bathroom floor like spilled paint. Help didn't come for 37 minutes. Enough time for Marcus to bleed out, but not so long as to be obviously deliberate. Dr. Thorne's response was clinically detached when he finally arrived with his medical team. Marcus couldn't integrate the therapeutic breakthroughs, he announced to the remaining 4 as they stood around their friend's covered body. Sometimes the mind rejects healing. His death provides valuable data about the limits of body dysmorphic intervention. Let this be a lesson about the importance of commitment to the therapeutic process. Maya felt her world shatter completely. Her perfectionism turned inward with devastating force. She should have prevented this, should have seen the warning signs, should have been perfect enough to save him. I failed him, she whispered, staring at Marcus's covered form. I was supposed to protect everyone, and I failed. David's military mind processed Marcus's death as a tactical loss, triggering the familiar guilt of surviving when others didn't. I should have checked on him, should have done perimeter sweeps, should have seen this coming. Sarah retreated into herself, But this time it wasn't from fear, it was from rage. The invisible girl who had never stood up for herself was furious at the injustice of Marcus's death, and that fury was burning away her social anxiety like acid. Alex couldn't hold any personality stable. They shifted rapidly between grieving friend, protective warrior, analytical observer, and scared child, unable to process the loss of someone who had seen all of their selves as equally valid. But Marcus's death also served as a brutal wake-up call. This wasn't therapy, this wasn't treatment, this was something much worse, and they were running out of time. Sarah's rage channeled into action. While the others grieved openly, she began systematically documenting everything about the sanctuary that felt wrong. Her journal had grown from personal observations to detailed evidence gathering. She noticed the staff's military bearing, the lack of proper medical equipment in the treatment rooms, the sophisticated recording devices hidden throughout the facility. Most importantly, she realized that their therapy sessions were being broadcast to remote locations. She'd caught glimpses of indicator lights on cameras that suggested live streaming rather than simple recording. "We're not patients," she told the others during a whispered conference in the library. "We're test subjects. Everything he's doing to us is being watched by other people." Maya's analytical mind engaged despite her grief. That explains the escalation pattern. Each exercise builds on the previous one, testing our limits systematically. "Military contractors," David added grimly. "The equipment, the personnel, the funding. This is government-sponsored research." Alex's academic personality surfaced. "Psychological warfare development. They're testing how to break people with specific mental health conditions." "We have to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice steady with newfound determination. "And we have to make sure everyone knows what happened to Marcus." But escaping the sanctuary would prove more difficult than they imagined. The facility was a fortress, the staff were trained killers, and Dr. Thorne was just getting started with his research. Alex used their knowledge from various past identities, lockpicking from their rebellious phase, social engineering from their con artist period, surveillance techniques from their paranoid conspiracy theorist identity, to gain access to Dr. Thorne's office during one of David's particularly brutal therapy sessions. The office after hours was different from the warm, comfortable space they knew. Hidden panels revealed banks of monitors showing feeds from every room in the facility. Filing cabinets contained detailed psychological profiles not just of current patients, but of dozens of previous subjects. Maya's file was labeled Perfectionist Control Study, Subject 47, and contained detailed notes about her pressure points. Subjects' need for order can be exploited through impossible tasks. Failure triggers severe anxiety that compounds exponentially. Recommend using subjects' protective instincts toward other patients as additional leverage. David's file was marked PTSD Retraumatization Protocol, Subject 51, with military precision. Subject survivor guilt is primary vulnerability. Suggest incorporating loved ones into trauma scenarios for maximum psychological impact. Note, subject's protective instincts make him excellent for testing leadership breakdown under extreme stress. Sarah's documentation was titled Social Anxiety Weaponization, Subject 43. Subject's fear of judgment can be amplified through systematic ignoring protocols. Recommend complete social invisibility exercises to confirm subject's worthlessness belief system. Alex's file was the thickest. Multiple Personality Integration Experiment, Subject 39. Subject's identity fragmentation allows for controlled personality destruction and reconstruction, valuable for developing techniques to reshape enemy agents' core identities. But it was Marcus's file that made Alex's blood run cold. Body Dysmorphic Self-Harm Study, Subject 55, terminated. Subject successfully manipulated into self-mutilation through digital comparison therapy. Death provides excellent data on BDD patients' breaking points. Recommend applying similar techniques to eating disorder subjects. The filing cabinets revealed the true scope of Dr. Thorne's operation. Dozens of previous patients, most marked terminated, case study complete, or transferred to permanent facility. Video recordings showed the systematic destruction of human minds, all in the name of research into psychological malleability under extreme stress. Marcus wasn't Dr. Thorne's first victim. He was number 55. The recordings were horrific. Young people with depression being driven to suicide through carefully calibrated hopelessness exercises, veterans being re-traumatized until they suffered complete psychological breaks, anxious individuals being isolated until they lost all connection to reality. All of it was documented with clinical detachment, subjects referred to by numbers rather than names. Alex found a computer logged into Dr. Thorne's research database. The files revealed the true purpose of the sanctuary: illegal human experimentation funded by shadow programs in multiple government agencies. The research was being used to develop psychological warfare techniques, interrogation methods, and population control strategies. Maya's perfectionism made her an ideal candidate for studying how to weaponize someone's need for control. David's PTSD provided data on re-traumatizing combat veterans into compliance. Sarah's social anxiety offered insights into rendering people completely invisible and powerless. Alex's identity issues were perfect for studying personality dissolution and reconstruction. Marcus had been selected to test how far body dysmorphic patients could be pushed towards self-destruction. Each of them had been chosen not for treatment, but as representatives of specific psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited on a larger scale. Alex photographed everything with their phone before the battery died, then began copying files by hand onto whatever paper they could find. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing government funding, correspondence with military contractors, detailed reports on successful terminations. One email chain discussed expanding the research. Preliminary results on subjects with anxiety disorders show promise for crowd control applications. Recommend recruiting larger sample size for next phase. Another document outlined plans for treatment centers in major cities designed to attract people seeking mental health help and funnel them into research programs. Public-private partnerships with existing therapy networks could provide steady supply of test subjects while maintaining plausible cover story. Dr. Thorne wasn't just a sadistic psychologist. He was the architect of a program designed to weaponize mental illness against the people who suffered from it. They confronted Dr. Thorne the next morning during what was supposed to be their regular group session. Alex had managed to smuggle out key documents and photographs, while Sarah's journal provided a detailed timeline of abuse. Maya had analyzed the evidence to build an airtight case, and David had assessed their tactical situation. They entered the therapy room as a united front, no longer the broken individuals who had arrived weeks ago. Sarah spoke first, her voice clear and strong. "We know what you really are. We know about the government funding, the previous subjects, the real purpose of this facility." Dr. Thorne's expression didn't change, but something cold and predatory flickered behind his eyes. "That's quite an accusation, Sarah. I'm concerned that your paranoid ideation is affecting the group dynamic." "Cut the shit," Alex said, their protective personality fully engaged. "We have documentation, photos, evidence." Maya placed the copied files on the table between them, her movements precise despite her emotional devastation. 54 previous subjects, 37 confirmed deaths, military contractor funding. This isn't therapy, it's weapons research. "And Marcus was your latest data point," David added, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a soldier stating facts. For the first time since they'd met him, Dr. Thorne's mask slipped completely. His warm, understanding expression dissolved into something reptilian and hungry. "Did you really think this was about helping you?" he laughed, his cultured voice turning sharp and predatory. "You're lab rats. Broken little lab rats who volunteered to be experimented on because you were too pathetic to fix yourselves through conventional means." His words were surgical strikes designed to hit each of their deepest insecurities. Maya felt her carefully reconstructed confidence crumble as he continued. "Maya, you thought you were special because you were successful, but you're just another anxious perfectionist destroying herself with impossible standards. David, you're a broken soldier who couldn't protect his own men and certainly can't protect these people. Sarah, you're a nothing person who will always be invisible because there's nothing interesting about you to see. Alex, you're an empty shell pretending to be multiple people because you're too cowardly to be one person completely. Each word landed like a physical blow, confirming their worst fears about themselves. Sarah began hyperventilating. Maya's hands shook as her perfectionist defenses activated, trying to find the right response to this impossible situation. Alex dissociated so completely, they couldn't remember where they were. David's hand moved instinctively toward a weapon that wasn't there. The beautiful thing about psychological torture, Dr. Thorne continued, settling back in his chair like a satisfied cat, is that eventually, you do it to yourselves. I didn't kill Marcus, his own mind did. His body dysmorphic disorder was the weapon. I just aimed it properly. Which of you will be next? Maya will probably have a heart attack trying to solve an unsolvable problem. David will eventually turn that soldier training on himself when the guilt becomes unbearable. Sarah will fade away until she's actually invisible. And Alex will fragment so completely they'll forget they were ever real. You're wrong, Sarah said, surprising everyone including herself. You're wrong about all of us. Dr. Thorne raised an eyebrow. Am I? Then why are you all still here? Why didn't you leave when you had the chance? Because we're not the broken people you think we are, Maya said, her voice gaining strength. We're people who've survived trauma and developed coping mechanisms. We're people who found each other and built something real. Marcus died because you convinced him he was broken, David added, his military bearing returning. But he wasn't broken. He was 19 years old and sick, and you exploited his illness instead of treating it. And that makes you the broken one, Alex said, all their personalities speaking in unison for the first time. Not us. Dr. Thorne's smile became genuinely frightening. We'll see about that. Security. The door burst open to reveal not medical staff, but armed mercenaries in tactical gear. The sanctuary revealed its true nature. A black site prison disguised as a hospital. Gentlemen, Dr. Thorne said to his security team, our subjects have completed the bonding phase ahead of schedule. Please escort them to the isolation wing. It's time to begin the separation protocols. David's military training took over the moment he saw the mercenaries. Years of combat experience compressed into split-second tactical assessment. 6 hostiles, armed with non-lethal weapons. They wanted the subjects alive, blocking the only obvious exit. We run. Now, stay together, stay low, follow my lead, he commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority for the first time since arriving at the sanctuary. They fled through the building's maze of corridors, David leading with Maya close behind, her analytical mind automatically mapping their route. Sarah ran despite her terror, driven by rage over Marcus's death and love for her surviving friends. Alex shifted between personalities rapidly, sometimes bold and confrontational, sometimes ghost-like and invisible, confusing their pursuers. The building was larger than they'd realized, with multiple levels and hidden passages. David's military experience helped him navigate by sound and instinct, avoiding the obvious routes in favor of service corridors and maintenance areas. Where are we going? Maya gasped as they descended a narrow staircase. Down. Underground means fewer sightlines, more cover, closer to utilities we can disrupt. And then what? Sarah asked, her newfound courage wavering as adrenaline faded. Then we survive long enough to get help. But the sanctuary had been designed to prevent escape. Doors locked automatically behind them, corridors led to dead ends, and Dr. Thorne's voice followed them through hidden speakers. This is excellent data on group cohesion under extreme stress. Notice how they default to military hierarchy when threatened. David's PTSD becomes an asset in combat situations, while the other's disorders manifest as specific behavioral patterns under pressure. They made it to the building's mechanical level before being cornered in a room full of generators and water heaters. 6 mercenaries blocked the only exit, tranquilizer guns trained on the group. Surrender and return to your rooms, the lead mercenary commanded. Dr. Thorne promises that compliance will result in more comfortable accommodations. David stepped forward, positioning himself between the weapons and his friends. His body language shifted completely. From traumatized veteran to trained soldier, shoulders square, movements economical and deadly. Here's a counteroffer, he said calmly. You lower those weapons and walk away, and I won't have to hurt you. The mercenaries laughed. 4 psychiatric patients against 6 armed professionals? Stand down, soldier. 3 psychiatric patients and 1 very pissed-off army ranger. David corrected. "And we're not patients, we're his friends." What happened next lasted less than 30 seconds, but changed everything. David moved with the fluid violence of someone trained to kill efficiently and without hesitation. The mercenaries had expected to subdue a traumatized veteran. Instead, they faced a combat-hardened soldier, fighting to protect his family. He used the environment as a weapon, scalding water from damaged pipes, electrical shorts from torn cables, the mechanical room's tight quarters, turning into a maze of cover and concealment. His PTSD symptoms, which had been a disability in civilian life, became tactical advantages in combat. But there were too many of them, and they were using non-lethal weapons while David fought to kill. The tranquilizer darts found their mark eventually, dropping him to his knees as his enhanced metabolism fought the sedatives. "I couldn't save my unit," he told Maya, pressing Marcus's hidden sketchbook into her hands as his vision blurred. "But I can save you. Run. Get out. Tell people what happened here." "David." "No." Maya reached for him, but Alex and Sarah dragged her toward a maintenance tunnel. David's sacrifice had revealed. "Go," he shouted as more mercenaries flooded into the room. "That's an order?" Maya screamed his name, but Alex and Sarah pulled her into the darkness as tranquilizer darts filled the air around them. Behind them, they heard David's body hit the floor, but also the groans and curses of mercenaries he'd taken down with military efficiency. 3 friends fled into the tunnel system as gunfire erupted behind them, carrying Marcus's art and the weight of 2 devastating losses. They emerged from the tunnels into the Colorado wilderness 40 minutes later, climbing out of a drainage pipe a mile from the sanctuary. It was November, and snow was already falling heavily. They had no supplies, no communications, and no idea how far they were from civilization. Maya's perfectionism focused on immediate survival needs, shelter, navigation, resource management. But the wilderness didn't care about her plans or her analytical skills. Nature was chaos, and no amount of organization could control weather, terrain, or the limits of human endurance. Sarah's social anxiety seemed almost irrelevant in the face of life-or-death survival, but her observational skills proved invaluable. She noticed landmarks, tracked their path, and spotted signs of pursuit before the others. Alex's multiple personalities became an asset rather than a liability. Their outdoor identity knew basic wilderness survival. Their strategic thinker could plan routes and conserve energy. Their performer could keep morale up when despair threatened to overwhelm them. "We need to keep moving," Maya said, checking her watch obsessively. "They'll have search teams out within the hour." "Which direction?" Sarah asked, scanning the tree line for threats she was finally brave enough to face. Alex consulted their mental compass from various camping personalities. "Northeast. There's a highway about 15 miles that way, assuming we can navigate by the stars." They walked for hours through deepening snow, following David's remembered lessons about wilderness survival and tactical movement. Maya fought to maintain control as the situation spiraled beyond her ability to manage, but gradually learned to trust her instincts instead of her need for perfect information. Sarah surprised everyone by keeping up despite her physical inexperience, driven by fury and love in equal measure. "Marcus died because we trusted that monster," she said, her voice hard with determination. "David probably died saving us. I'm not going to waste their sacrifices by giving up now." Alex found that extreme stress actually stabilized their personalities somewhat. Survival required focus, and focus required choosing which identity to trust. They settled primarily into their protective warrior mode, the version of themselves that had emerged to defend the group. Thorne's voice echoed from speakers hidden throughout the forest. A technological maze designed to prevent escape and provide psychological torture, even in the wilderness. "You can't run from yourselves," his voice taunted them as they stumbled through the snow. "I've shown you what you really are. Maya, you're a control freak whose perfectionism destroys everything she touches. Sarah, you're invisible because you're worthless. Alex, you're nothing but fragments of trauma pretending to be a person." The speakers were motion-activated, following their progress through the forest. "Come back and I'll make it quick. Stay out here, and you'll die slowly of exposure while confronting the truth about your fundamental inadequacy." Maya tried to block out the voice by focusing on navigation problems, but exhaustion and medication withdrawal were making it harder to think clearly. Sarah covered her ears, but couldn't escape the words that confirmed her deepest fears. Alex's personalities began fragmenting again under the psychological pressure. "He's in our heads," Alex said, cycling rapidly between identities. "Even out here, he's still in our heads." "Then we get him out," Sarah said with surprising ferocity. "We survived his worst, and we're still together. That proves he's wrong about everything." They found shelter in a shallow cave as the temperature dropped and the snow intensified. Maya tried to organize their limited resources, while Sarah and Alex gathered firewood. Without David's military expertise, they were struggling with basic survival tasks. Huddled together for warmth, they talked through the night to stay awake and alert. Maya found herself opening up about her childhood, describing a mother who showed love through criticism and a father who was never satisfied with anything less than perfection. "I started organizing my toys by color when I was 4, she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "Not because I liked it, but because chaos felt dangerous. If everything was perfect, maybe they'd finally be proud of me." "Were they?" Sarah asked. "Never. There was always something that could be better, something I'd missed, some way I'd fallen short. I spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never going to come." Alex shared their earliest memory of feeling like a different person, hiding from their father's drinking by becoming whoever they thought would be safe in that moment. The rebel fought back. The good kid tried to be invisible. The performer made everyone laugh so they'd forget to be angry. But none of them were really me. "Who is really you?" Sarah asked. "Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. Maybe it doesn't matter as long as people I love can see something worth caring about." Sarah talked about growing up feeling like an alien observer of human society, watching other people live lives that seemed as foreign as space travel. "I wanted to be brave, to speak up, to take risks. But every time I tried, something terrible happened. So I learned to be small and quiet and invisible." "But you're not invisible now," Maya observed. "You stood up to Dr. Thorne. You documented everything. You're the reason we have evidence." "I found my voice by finding people worth speaking for," Sarah realized. "I couldn't be brave for myself, but I could be brave for you." They talked about Marcus, about David, about the future they were going to build in honor of their sacrifice. Maya spoke about using her analytical skills to expose psychological abuse in treatment facilities. Sarah imagined becoming an advocate for people too scared to advocate for themselves. Alex wanted to write about identity and trauma, giving voice to the complexity of human experience. "We're going to survive this," Maya said as dawn approached. "And we're going to make sure no one else goes through what we did." But the approaching sunrise brought new dangers. Dr. Thorne's search teams were closing in, and their physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. Dr. Thorne led the search personally, his refined facade completely abandoned. The man who had presented himself as a caring healer now appeared as he truly was. A predator, enraged that his prey had escaped. He'd survived worse than a few broken ribs and a concussion from David's assault. More importantly, he had too much invested in this research to let his subjects escape. The government contracts were worth millions, and failure meant not just financial loss but potential prosecution if his methods were exposed. "Find them," he commanded his remaining mercenaries. "Alive if possible, but don't let them reach civilization. Too much is at stake." The search teams used thermal imaging and tracking dogs, following the fugitives' trail through the snow. Dr. Thorne provided psychological profiles to help predict their movements. Maya will try to plan their route logically, but she's never been in survival situations. She'll make rookie mistakes. Sarah will follow the group, but slow them down. She's not physically prepared for this kind of stress. Alex is unpredictable, but their fragmentation makes them unreliable under extreme pressure. What he didn't account for was how much they'd changed during their time at the sanctuary. Trauma had broken them down, but love had built them back up stronger. They were spotted by a drone around noon on their second day in the wilderness. The temperature had dropped to dangerous levels, and hypothermia was becoming a real threat. Maya's perfectionist planning had kept them moving in the right direction, but exhaustion was taking its toll. There, Sarah pointed to smoke rising in the distance. That might be a ranger station or a cabin. It was an abandoned fire lookout tower, but it offered shelter and a radio that might still work. They climbed the tower as the sound of helicopters grew closer, David's survival lessons echoing in their minds. Alex got the old radio working using knowledge from their electronics hobbyist phase, but the signal was weak and intermittent. Mayday, mayday, this is shit. What do we call ourselves? The survivors, Sarah said grimly. They managed to get a partial message out before the helicopters arrived. Maya's analytical mind worked frantically to calculate their options, but every scenario ended in death or recapture. That's when Sarah made her choice. I spent my whole life being invisible, she said, moving toward the tower's entrance. Maybe it's time to be seen. She stepped out onto the tower's platform, directly into the spotlight of the circling helicopter, and began waving her arms. Not in surrender, but in defiance. Drawing their attention, buying her friends time to escape. Sarah, no! Maya screamed, but it was too late. The sniper's shot was meant to be non-lethal, but Sarah was small and the bullet hit higher than intended, tearing through her lung instead of her shoulder. She fell to the platform, blood spreading across the snow like spilled wine. Alex and Maya reached her first, applying pressure to the wound while the helicopter landed and mercenaries surrounded the tower. I'm not invisible anymore, Sarah whispered, her voice growing weaker. You see me. You all see me. We've always seen you, Maya sobbed, pressing harder on the wound. You were never invisible to us. I know, Sarah smiled, blood frothing at her lips. That's why I can be brave now. That's why it's okay. She died holding their hands, her face peaceful, finally at rest from a lifetime of fear. Alex's grief triggered a complete personality split. The protective warrior took control completely, and for the first time since childhood, they felt focused and whole. They had one purpose: make Dr. Haythorne pay for what he'd done. Using their massive pool of knowledge, Alex began making explosives from cleaning supplies found in the tower's maintenance shed. Maya tried to stop them, her perfectionist need for careful planning warring with the chaos of the situation. This is suicide, she argued. We need to be smart about this, plan properly. Planning didn't save Marcus. Planning didn't save David. Planning didn't save Sarah, Alex snarled, their personalities cycling rapidly between grief and rage. Sometimes you have to burn it all down. They rigged the tower and the surrounding forest with improvised incendiaries, creating a maze of fire and explosion designed to take out as many of Dr. Thorne's people as possible. Maya found herself helping despite her better judgment, her love for her dead friends overriding her need for perfect solutions. When Dr. Thorne's ground team reached the tower, they walked into an inferno. 3 mercenaries died in the initial explosions, and the forest fire spread rapidly in the dry mountain air. Maya and Alex fled through the burning forest, pursued by the remaining mercenaries and a wounded, enraged Dr. Thorne. I'm gonna take you apart piece by piece, he screamed, blood streaming from shrapnel wounds. I'll keep you alive for months, breaking you down until you beg me to let you die like your pathetic friends. The forest fire created a hellscape of smoke and flame, turning their escape into a nightmare of heat and suffocation. Maya's perfectionist planning had to adapt to constantly changing conditions. Wind shifts, blocked paths, the unpredictable spread of flame. Alex's personalities worked together for the first time, each one contributing different skills to their survival. The outdoors personality navigated by stars visible through smoke. The strategic thinker planned routes through the fire. The performer kept Maya's spirits up when despair threatened to overwhelm her. We're going to make it, Alex said during a brief rest in a rocky outcropping. We're going to get out of here and tell everyone what happened. And then what? Maya asked, staring at the flames consuming the forest around them. Even if we survive, even if we expose him, Marcus and Sarah and David are still dead. Then we live for them, Alex replied. We live the lives they didn't get to have. We'd be brave like Sarah, protective like David, beautiful like Marcus. I don't know how to live without trying to be perfect, Maya admitted. Then be perfectly imperfect. Be perfectly human. Be perfectly yourself. They ran through snow and flame, exhausted and wounded, their psychological issues now seeming trivial compared to the immediate threat of death. Maya's perfectionism had transformed into fierce determination. Alex's fractured identity had become fluid adaptability, allowing them to respond to rapidly changing dangers. They reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a frozen lake far below, the same precipice where Marcus had once talked about feeling like he was falling even when he was standing still. Behind them, Dr. Thorne approached with a gun, no longer bothering with capture protocols. "End of the line," he snarled, his refined accent completely gone. "Time to complete the case studies." Maya and Alex stood at the precipice, holding hands. A month ago, they had been strangers united only by their psychological pain. Now they were something more, chosen family, forged in trauma and loss, bonded by love stronger than blood. "I need you to know something," Maya said, looking directly into Alex's eyes. "Meeting you, all of you, was the best thing that ever happened to me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was enough, exactly as I was. You taught me that I don't have to choose just one way of being," Alex replied, their voice steady for the first time since childhood. "You showed me that love doesn't require consistency. It just requires truth." Dr. Thorne raised his gun, savoring the moment. His research was nearly complete. The data on group bonding under extreme stress, the behavioral patterns of different psychological disorders under pressure, the exact breaking points of human resilience. Even their deaths would provide valuable information. "Any last words for my research notes?" he asked, his finger tightening on the trigger. Maya thought of Marcus's drawings depicting them as superheroes, of Sarah's hidden courage finally finding its voice, of David's sacrifice that had given them this chance. She thought of the lives they'd touched each other's hearts, the healing they'd found in each other's acceptance, the family they'd built from shared brokenness. "Yeah," she said, smiling with genuine peace for the first time in her life. "Go fuck yourself." The gunshot echoed across the valley, but it wasn't Dr. Thorne who pulled the trigger. Alex had tackled him as he fired, their protective personality fully engaged, sending both of them over the cliff edge in a tangle of limbs and fury. Maya watched in shock as they fell together toward the frozen lake below, Alex's body shielding her from Dr. Thorne's final shot. She heard the impact from 200 feet above, the crack of ice, the splash of freezing water, then silence. She found Alex's body an hour later, having somehow climbed down the treacherous cliff face using rock climbing techniques from her college adventure sports phase. They had died on impact, but their face was peaceful, finally at rest. Dr. Thorne's body was nowhere to be found, lost beneath the ice or swept away by the current under the frozen surface. Maya sat with Alex's body until the search and rescue team found her 3 days later, hypothermic and delirious, but still protecting her friend. She'd wrapped Alex in her own coat and talked to them constantly, telling stories about the future they'd planned together, the advocacy work they'd discussed, the ways they would honor their fallen friends. The search and rescue team found Maya on the shore of the frozen lake, nearly dead from exposure but still holding Alex's hand. She was rushed to a Denver hospital where she spent 2 weeks in intensive care, recovering from severe hypothermia and psychological trauma. The authorities found the sanctuary partially destroyed by fire, most of the staff evacuated, and evidence systematically destroyed. David was discovered in the medical wing, heavily sedated but alive, though he'd been subjected to additional experiments during Maya's escape. The official investigation was swift. The facility was classified as an unlicensed treatment center that had engaged in experimental therapy without proper oversight. Dr. Elias Thorne was listed as missing, presumed dead in the forest fire. No mention was made of government connections, military contractors, or illegal human experimentation. Key evidence had vanished: the computer files Alex had photographed, the government funding records, the documentation of previous subjects. Only Sarah's handwritten journal survived, and even that was heavily redacted in official reports. Maya woke up in the hospital to find herself the sole survivor of what the media called the sanctuary tragedy. David was alive, but catatonic, his mind shattered by whatever Dr. Thorne had done to him during the final days. The doctors said his prognosis was uncertain. He might recover, he might not. He might remain in his current vegetative state indefinitely. Maya's parents flew in from California, their relief at her survival mixed with confusion about what had happened. "We don't understand how you ended up in a place like that," her mother said. "We thought you were doing so well in your career." Maya tried to explain about the perfectionism, the anxiety, the crushing weight of never being good enough, but they couldn't hear it. To them, she was their successful daughter, who had somehow gotten mixed up with disturbed people and paid the price. "You're going to be fine," her father assured her. "You'll get back to work, put this behind you, move on with your life." But Maya knew she would never be the same person who had arrived at the sanctuary. The perfectionist who had needed everything to be exactly right had died in that white room with the impossible tasks. What remained was someone harder, but also more compassionate, someone who understood that survival was more important than success. Maya testified at congressional hearings about unregulated mental health facilities, but the full truth was buried in classified files. She spoke about psychological abuse, about vulnerable people being exploited, about the need for oversight and accountability. "These facilities prey on people at their most desperate moments," she told the committee, her voice steady despite the trauma. "They promise healing and deliver destruction. Without proper regulation, without oversight, more people will die." But she couldn't mention the government funding, the military applications, the fact that the sanctuary had been a weapons research facility. Those details were classified, and revealing them would result in prosecution for national security violations. The committee expressed sympathy and promised reform, but Maya could see in their eyes that nothing meaningful would change. There were too many powerful interests invested in the research Dr. Thorne had been conducting. David recovered slowly, his mind rebuilding itself piece by piece over months of intensive therapy. The additional trauma he'd suffered during Maya's escape had layered new wounds over his existing PTSD, creating a complex psychological injury that defied easy treatment. But he had something to fight for now, the memory of his friends and the promise he'd made to protect Maya. His recovery became a tribute to their sacrifice, each small victory dedicated to honoring their memory. "They saved me," he told his new therapist, a genuine healer who specialized in trauma recovery. "Even after they died, they kept saving me. Maya taught me that strength doesn't require perfection. Sarah showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. Alex demonstrated that you can be multiple things and still be whole. Marcus proved that beauty comes from how you see others, not how they see you." His relationship with his ex-wife and daughter slowly healed as he learned to live with his trauma rather than being consumed by it. Emma, now 6, didn't understand why Daddy had been sick, but she was thrilled to have him back in her life. "Did you really save people, Daddy?" she asked during one of their visits to the park. "I tried to," David said, watching her play on the swings, "but mostly, other people saved me." Maya left her high-pressure job at Pemberton and Associates and became an advocate for ethical psychological treatment. She used her analytical skills to investigate treatment facilities, her perfectionism channeled into exposing abuse rather than pursuing impossible standards. Her apartment was still organized, but not with the desperate precision of before. She kept Marcus's sketchbook on her coffee table, Sarah's journal on her nightstand, and photos of all 5 of them together during their brief time as a family. The nightmares came regularly. Visions of Dr. Thorne still alive, still hunting, still destroying vulnerable people for his research. She'd wake screaming Alex's name or sobbing over Sarah's final words or calling out tactical advice to David as he faced impossible odds. Therapy helped, but healing was slow. Maya had to learn to live with uncertainty, to accept that she couldn't control everything, to find meaning in imperfect progress rather than perfect solutions. "Do you think they'd be proud of what you're doing?" her therapist asked during one session. Maya looked at Marcus's final drawing, which she kept framed on her desk. It showed all 5 of them as superheroes, standing together against the darkness. In his artistic vision, they were powerful, beautiful, and whole. "I think they'd tell me I'm being too hard on myself," she said. Marcus would say I'm perfect the way I am, flaws and all. David would remind me that survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about protecting the people you love. Sarah would tell me I'm not responsible for saving everyone, just for doing my best. Alex would make some joke that completely reframes everything and makes me laugh despite myself. She touched the glass over their faces. I think they'd want me to remember that we weren't broken people who needed fixing. We were human beings who deserved love and help and hope. Dr. Thorne was wrong about that, and about everything else. Maya's foundation, the Marcus Thompson Center for Ethical Mental Health Treatment, became a leading voice in facility oversight and patient rights. She worked with legislators to strengthen regulations, with families to identify warning signs of abusive treatment, with survivors to find their voices. Each case she investigated felt personal. Every vulnerable person seeking help reminded her of herself 4 months ago, desperate enough to trust a stranger who promised healing. Every facility she exposed felt like a small victory against Dr. Thorne's legacy. She spoke at conferences about the intersection of psychological vulnerability and exploitation, about the need for transparency in mental health treatment, about the warning signs that separated legitimate therapy from psychological abuse. People seeking mental health treatment are often at their most vulnerable, she told a room full of mental health professionals. They're in pain, isolated, desperate for help. That desperation makes them perfect targets for predators who understand how to weaponize hope. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking, but it gave meaning to her friends' deaths. Every facility she helped shut down, every vulnerable person she helped protect, was a tribute to Marcus's gentleness, Sarah's courage, Alex's complexity, and David's sacrifice. Maya visited David regularly at the VA hospital where he was continuing his recovery. Their friendship had been forged in trauma, but it was sustained by genuine care and shared purpose. "Bad day?" he asked during one visit, noticing her exhaustion. Investigated a facility in Arizona that was using experimental drugs on teenagers with eating disorders. Reminded me too much of... She gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. "Of us," David completed. "Of what happened to us." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who understood each other's pain without needing to explain it. David was better, not healed, probably never fully healed, but functional. He was working with other veterans now, using his experience to help people fighting similar battles. "Do you think we could have saved them?" Maya asked, a question that haunted both of them. "We did save them," David replied. "Not their lives, but their dignity, their truth, their love for each other. Dr. Thorne wanted to prove we were broken, worthless, disposable. Instead, we proved we were capable of love, sacrifice, and heroism. That's not nothing." "It doesn't feel like enough." "It's everything," David said firmly. "It's everything that matters." On the first anniversary of Marcus's death, Maya and David held a private memorial service at a small art gallery in Denver. Marcus's family had donated his artwork, not just the sketches from the sanctuary, but years of paintings and drawings that showed his talent and sensitivity. The centerpiece was his final drawing of the group as superheroes. But surrounding it were portraits of David's daughter, Maya's sister, Alex's various identities, Sarah in moments of quiet confidence. Even in his pain, Marcus had been documenting love and beauty wherever he found it. Sarah's mother attended, finally understanding the daughter she'd lost. "I never knew she was so brave," she said, reading excerpts from Sarah's journal that Maya had shared. "I thought she was just quiet." "She was the bravest person I ever met," Maya replied. "She faced her worst fears every day just by existing in a world that scared her. That's heroism most people can't imagine." Alex's parents came too, bringing photo albums that showed their child's many phases and identities. "We never understood," Alex's mother said. "We kept trying to get them to pick one thing, be consistent. We thought we were helping." "They were all real," Maya assured her. "Every identity, every phase, every version of themselves. All real, all valid, all part of who they were." But even surrounded by people who loved and missed her friends, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Thorne was still out there somewhere. The body was never found. The research was never fully exposed, and people with psychological vulnerabilities continued to disappear into facilities that promised healing. She hired private investigators to search for him, spent her own money following leads that never panned out, dedicated her life to the possibility that somewhere he was continuing his work. The paranoia was partly trauma response, her mind's way of processing survivors' guilt and unresolved grief. But it was also partly intuition. The same analytical skills that had made her successful in finance now focused on a different kind of pattern recognition. David's recovery accelerated when he found purpose in helping other veterans navigate the mental health system. His experience at the sanctuary had given him unique insight into the difference between genuine therapy and psychological exploitation. "I can spot the predators now," he told Maya during one of their visits. "The ones who promise miracle cures, who isolate you from support systems, who make you feel grateful for abuse because they call it healing." He developed a program for veteran peer support, teaching others to recognize the warning signs they'd missed. His military training, which had been a liability in civilian life, became an asset in protecting others from the predators who lurked in the shadows of legitimate treatment. But on a cold December evening, exactly 13 months after their escape from the sanctuary, Maya received an email that made her blood run cold. The sender's address was a string of random numbers, but the message was unmistakable. "My dear Maya, I trust you've been well. Your advocacy work has been most illuminating. Such passion, such dedication to protecting the vulnerable. I've been watching your progress with great interest. The research continues, you see, and I believe it's time for a reunion. After all, we never did complete your treatment. E.T." Attached was a photograph taken through her apartment window. Maya sitting at her desk, Marcus's sketchbook open beside her, completely unaware she was being observed. In the corner of the image, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure she recognized despite the surgical alterations to his face. Dr. Elias Thorne was alive, and he was ready to finish what he'd started.